So, when we say restoration, we mean that monarchy was restored in England. It was set up again, and England got back its king. The Parliament invited Charles I son to come back to England and rule England as its king. The thing is that they only executed Charles I himself, not his family. His wife and the children managed to flee England. They were allowed to flee England, and they settled in France mostly. So Charles II was brought up at the court of Louis XIV, the famous Sun King, and well, of course, he enjoyed the French fashion and the French kind of entertainment, so he brought all of that to England. The year 1660 is when the Parliament invited Charles II to come back to England, and this was a triumph, in fact, when Charles II landed in England and was traveling through the whole country to London. He was greeted by joyful crowds all over the country, chanting "Long live the King" and ringing bells and flying flags. So it was a huge scale celebration for people all over the country. But Charles II was called the Merry Monarch. He believed in high life and extravagances for himself and the court, and he was witty and good-humored, but at the same time quite selfish and vicious, and was very little concerned about how others managed their lives. His motto was "Live and let others live," and as you can suppose, that's not the best position for the king. The court, following his example, corrupted the English society. The upper classes presented no such principles as patriotism or honor or sense of duty, and many vices became really customary, such as bribery in the government or drunkenness, or crime rates that soared, especially in big cities like London. So the most obvious characteristic of the period of Restoration is its slowward moral tone. Charles II, as a king, believed in the divine right, just like his father and grandfather, and he admired the absolute power of Louis XIV. But trying to establish a stable society on a firm basis, he restored the normal functions of Parliament, and all his life he tried to avoid an open break with it. Charles was tolerant to different religious groups and made attempts to unite all of them presented in England, that is, Catholics, Puritans, and Anglicans. But the fact that he was raised in Catholic France gave rise to rumors that the king wanted to restore Catholicism in England, and both Puritans and Anglicans were against that, of course. So, in some years, the Parliament, which was mostly filled by the Anglicans, passed the Test Act. According to the Test Act, Catholics were not allowed to take positions of authority in the government, and there was a number of other limitations imposed on people of other religious views than the Anglicans. So the Anglican Church became the only officially admitted church in England, and all representatives of other religious groups were limited in their rules. For example, well, among other things, representatives of other religious groups were not allowed to be educated officially, so they couldn't go to schools or colleges or universities. The Test Act developed the confrontation between the king and the parliament, and well, the members of parliament actually knew that it was going to do so, and in fact it was their intention to weaken the monarchy in England. The result of these actions was the establishment of two political parties, the Whigs and the Tories. In a way, we can say that the Whigs and the Tories inherited their ideas from the Royalists and Puritans of the Civil War times. The Whigs were merchants, businessmen, and certain lords who feared the power of the king, so they followed the ideas of Roundheads. The Whigs believed that Parliament should be stronger than the king, and that it should be guided by the House of Commons, not the House of Lords. They also believed in religious freedoms because many of the Whigs were dissenters. The term dissenters, in fact, means a person of any religious views but for Anglican. So Catholics, Puritans, and Protestants belonged to Catholics and Protestants, not Puritans, belonged to the group of dissenters because Puritanism was a movement within the Anglican Church. And as you can see in the screen, the Whigs was a rude name for cattle drivers, so this nickname was given to the Whigs by their opponents, and you can see you can guess the relations between the two parties. And the Tories, which is an Irish name for thieves, were a more conservative party. They believed in king's power, but it was not absolute monarchy any longer. It was the king's power limited by decisions of parliament. Also, they favored the authority of the Anglican Church, and so many of the Tories were the descendants of the Royalists and shared the views of their ancestors. The Tories were greatly favored by Charles II and were often given high positions in the Anglican Church and the court. And we can say that these two parties formed the two-party parliamentary system in Britain, actually, because the Whigs and the Tories developed into two biggest political parties that still exist in England nowadays. The Whigs have become the Liberal Party and the Tories the Conservative Party. The Conservative Party is the Labour Party is traditionally the party of the working class people. And as you can see, many things changed in the society in the period of Restoration, but one positive change is that the Restoration period marks the beginning of the scientific age, and Charles II brought from France his interest in scientific experiments too, and he established the Royal Scientific Society in London. It was a meeting place for all kinds of scientists and philosophers, and he was the first president of this society himself. Isaac Newton was the president of this society also in his times.